Shinyensi grew up together with my elder sister as childhood sweethearts. Later, when my family fell from grace, he proposed to marry me instead. Everyone said that I was just a substitute for my deceased elder sister. After hearing it so many times, I really started to believe it myself, until he died trying to save me. In this new life, I heard the remarks about me being a substitute again, but this time, along with those remarks, there was another voice as well. Spreading rumors is easy, but refuting them takes so much effort. I've said it 800 times that I've never liked Wenbei at all. I'm already annoyed that I can't catch up with my wife, and now you guys are causing trouble. It's been a year since we got married. When will my wife be willing to scold me a few more times? I never knew that Shinyensi could be so talkative. I was standing in the banquet hall, holding his arm, in one ear. There were the idle gossip and whispers from the people around that drifted in from time to time. In the other ear, there was all of Shinyensi's endless muttering. What else do I need to do to clarify this? Every time someone asks me who I really like, I say it's Wen-nan. We're not twins. We don't look alike at all. How could she be a substitute? I wonder which genius came up with this rumor. Have they read too many romance novels? If they have the guts, they should come and say it to my face. Ugh. I'm really fed up. I already felt guilty about taking advantage of the Wen family's misfortune to get Wen-nan to marry me. Normally, I don't even dare to talk to her too much, for fear that she'll be annoyed with me and want to divorce me. But these people are still secretly causing trouble for me. I really want to acquire all of them. I was still immersed in the confusion of suddenly being able to hear Shinyensi's inner thoughts. But when I heard this sentence, I couldn't help it and looked at him in shock. Wait, the reason he's been so cold and distant towards me usually is that he doesn't dare to talk to me too much. I really thought it was because he was afraid that if I talked too much, I wouldn't be like my elder sister anymore. I accidentally stared at him a bit absent-mindedly. Shinyensi's inner muttering suddenly stopped. My wife is looking at me. Isn't she angry? Forget about the acquisition. I might as well just kill them all. He slightly tilted his head and looked at me. He still had that cold and distant expression. Are you tired? If you don't want to stay, we can go back first. I let out an ah and nodded subconsciously. Shinyensi immediately perfunctorily said a few words to the people beside him who were trying to curry favor. Then he made an excuse and took me away. In the car on the way home, Shinyensi was resting with his eyes closed. I propped my head up and looked outside the car. Still feeling that everything was not real, I opened my eyes this morning and found that I had been reborn. I was reborn just 1 year after I married Shinyensi. In my previous life, on the day of our 3rd wedding anniversary, we were framed and set up. Shinyensi took 2 bullets in order to save me. He dragged his injured body and hid me in a crevice, while he went alone to lead away those kidnappers. And not long before that, he had just proposed a divorce to me. Going further back, we hadn't seen each other for almost a year. Shinyensi risked his life, but I still didn't survive either. I was found by the kidnappers and taken to the side of Shinyensi's body. In the end, I died with him. When I just woke up this morning, I thought I had just had a very long dream. However, the pain of being on the verge of death was still imprinted in my soul. It made it impossible for me to deceive myself no matter what, so I could only accept this fact that I had been reborn. I spent a whole day digesting the news of my rebirth, and in the evening, I was shocked by Shinyensi's inner thoughts again. Thinking of the words I heard at the banquet just now, I couldn't help but turn my gaze to Shinyensi. I remember that in the first 2 years of our marriage in my previous life, our relationship was actually not bad. Although we weren't particularly close, we also weren't as incompatible as the outside world rumored, to put it bluntly. Just as Shinyensi said in his inner thoughts, he rarely talked to me, but he would quietly do some things for me behind the scenes. But at that time, I had heard too many rumors about being a substitute, so in my heart, I defaulted that everything he did was to make up for the regrets of Wenbei. When my family had an accident back then, I was the only one who survived. It was Shinyensi who helped me when I was at my most helpless, so I decided to repay him, no matter what he wanted. I once tried to imitate Wenbei's words and deeds and deliberately learned her dressing style. Shinyensi noticed and seriously stopped me. He said, I don't like Wenbei, just be Wen-nan. So I stopped imitating Wenbei and just showed a kind of docile obedience towards Shinyensi. But the more docile and obedient I was, the more obscure and difficult to discern his gaze became when he looked at me. Later, he appeared in front of me less and less often, until I didn't see him for a year. And finally he proposed a divorce to me. People really see things very differently from different perspectives. In my previous life, I always thought that he had come to his senses, got tired of me, and decided to stay away from me because he knew that I could never become Wenbei after all. But now it seems that things are not so simple, and those robbers, I must solve them as early as possible in this life. For a moment, all kinds of messy information filled my mind. Before I could figure anything out, Shinyensi's inner thoughts forcefully interrupted again. Why has Nan been staring at me? Is there something on my face? I should have listened to the styling team and made myself look more refined tonight. What if I'm so ugly that I scare her? No, I'd better hide. Next time, I'll definitely not be too lazy and will take the trouble to do my styling properly. As soon as his words fell, I watched as he turned his head to the other side. If I couldn't hear his inner thoughts, I would definitely think that he was disgusted with me. I was both angry and amused. I originally didn't want to pay attention to him, but by chance, I glanced and saw that he was rubbing his fingers. I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, after he stuffed me into the crevice to hide, he quickly bent down and kissed me. I was so tired and scared at that time that I was slow to respond to his comforting kiss for a long time. However, because of our position, I happened to be able to see his hand in front of him, which seemed to be rubbing his fingers unconsciously. This seemed to be a little gesture he would do when he was nervous. Thinking of the way he forced a smile at me with blood all over his body in my previous life, my heart suddenly softened. I don't know why, but the thought of ignoring him that I originally had just couldn't hold up anymore. I sighed resignedly in my heart. After a little thought, I suddenly said, Shinyensi, look at me. Shinyensi's body visibly stiffened for a moment. He slowly turned his head, and his delicate face was full of coldness and stiffness that kept people at a distance. But now when I look at him, I always feel that there seems to be an imperceptible tension hidden under his expressionless face. His mental activities also confirmed my feeling. My goodness, did Nan just order me? I haven't heard her speak to me in this tone since we were in university. I really want to cry. What should I do? Will Nan believe me if I say that the wind got into my eyes? No, why did she suddenly call me like this? Isn't she thinking of doing something stupid? Or is she going to divorce me? When Shinyensi thought of the last part, I clearly saw his pupils contract. I couldn't help but chuckle. I really didn't expect that Shinyensi had so many thoughts in his heart. It was really unexpected. And it was as if I was just starting to get to know him again. Shinyensi didn't say anything and just kept looking at me quietly. I ignored those noisy and anxious thoughts in his heart, followed my memories, and slowly said word by word, Shinyensi, what's the point of you paying to keep a styling team? I casually found an excuse and started trying to regain the feeling of being Nan. Don't you remember when President Chen was seized upon by his opponent regarding his dressing issue and was said to be disrespectful to the Cooperative Party? My tone wasn't very polite, and these were words that a gentle and polite person like Wenbei would definitely not say. Didn't I tell you that when you're out, your image is the image of the company? Don't think I didn't notice how perfunctory you were today. I watched as Shinyensi couldn't help it. His eyes slowly widened, and his body involuntarily sat up a little straighter. I curled the corners of my mouth, and there was an indescribable sense of relief in my heart. I haven't been Nan for a long time, but it feels really good to be Nan again. Shinyensi was so shocked that even his inner thoughts went silent. I didn't care either. I crossed my arms, casually leaned back on the chair, and raised my eyebrows to look at him. You should reflect on this situation when you go back today, and I'm tired. You'd better take good care of me tonight. I saw that Shinyensi's expression had completely turned into a daze. He was looking at me as if he had been stunned. Just then, the driver drove the car to the doorstep. I opened the car door. Before getting out, I suddenly turned around and squinted my eyes at him with a smile. If you don't take good care of me, I'll beat you to death tomorrow. After saying that, I turned around and got out of the car without hesitation. I had just taken 2 steps when there was a thud sound from behind, and then came Shinyensi's exclamation, Goodness, where have you taken me? Is this heaven? After I entered the house, I first went to remove my makeup and change my clothes. When I went back to the living room again, Shinyensi was still standing at the door. He was fumbling with his tie, not knowing whether to untie it or not, with his eyes slightly lowered, just looking at his appearance. It seemed as if he was pondering some big business deal worth billions. He had a kind of serious and mature charm. If you just looked at his appearance, what's wrong with Nan today? What does she want me to do? It doesn't matter if she beats me to death. But it's been more than a year since the Wen family's accident, and this is the first time I've seen her so relaxed like today. If I spoil her mood because of me, I might as well just end my own life. No, even if I die, I have to find the source of that substitute rumor and die with him. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to Shinyansi's inner thoughts with great interest. It was interesting, but I was also afraid that if he kept thinking like this, he would really end his own life with the tie. So after listening for a while, I still walked over. What's wrong? Is the tie sticky? You've been trying to untie it for 20 minutes. I deliberately lightened my steps. And Shinyansi was indeed so scared that his whole body stiffened. He almost reflexively tore off the tie. Then he started hanging up his clothes as if nothing had happened and said indifferently, "I'm thinking about something." I just watched him pretend. It wasn't until there were nervous voices in his heart that I hooked the corners of my mouth with a bit of malicious pleasure. "I'm hungry. Can you make me something to eat? I'll call someone to deliver it." As he said that, he was about to pick up his phone. I quickly stopped him. "It's not that troublesome. You can just cook me a bowl of noodles." I curved my eyebrows and eyes. "Of course, if it tastes too bad, you don't have to come back to the room tonight." After saying that, regardless of Shinyansi's slightly stunned gaze, I turned around and went back upstairs. I stood at the door of the study, hesitated for a moment, and then pushed the door open. In my previous life, I always regarded myself as an outsider and cautiously and restrainedly maintained a distance from Shinyansi. Even though Shinyansi had said that in this house, there was no place I couldn't go and nothing I couldn't touch, but I still stubbornly stuck to my bottom line. During the 3 years of our married life, I only used things that I bought with my own money, and I didn't enter any room on the second floor except the bedroom, especially a place with strong privacy like the study. I wouldn't even take an extra look at it. There was only one time when I entered his study, and then I saw. After a little thought, I took out a pink diary from a pile of thick reference books. According to my memory, this was Wenbei's diary. In my previous life, I firmly believed in that substitute rumor because I accidentally saw this diary, a man keeping the diary of another deceased woman. It's really hard not to associate it with feelings, but now I think things might not be so simple. Because at the last moment of my previous life before I died, I vaguely seemed to hear those kidnappers mention words like "that little girl from the Wen family" and "where is she hidden?" I'm sure that "that little girl from the Wen family" didn't refer to me. Could it be that Wenbei's death wasn't an accident? I stared at the diary in my hand, a bit lost in thought. In fact, as soon as I found out that I could hear Shinyansi's inner thoughts and confirmed that he really didn't like Wenbei, I thought of this diary. If Shinyansi didn't like Wenbei, then it was really strange for him to keep Wenbei's diary. I had an intuition that there might be something else recorded in this diary. Just as I was still hesitating whether to try to unlock the password, suddenly, there were footsteps in the corridor outside the study. Almost instinctively, I stuffed the diary back in its place and randomly took out a book and opened a page. Shinyansi walked to the door and knocked, still in that flat tone. "The noodles are ready, come and eat." I casually hummed, and endured my guilty conscience as I stuffed the book away casually. I was just about to say something to cover up my guilty conscience, but the moment I turned my head, I accidentally met Shinyansi's eyes. His gaze was as calm and peaceful as ever. Looking deeper, it seemed to contain infinite tolerance. Just as he said, in this house, there was no place I couldn't go and nothing I couldn't touch. The heart that had just sunk seemed to be pulled up again by a gentle gravitational force. It was light and a bit unreal. Even more amazingly, I couldn't hear Shinyansi's inner thoughts at all now. He wasn't thinking about anything. Everything he showed was the most real thought in his heart. My shoulders suddenly relaxed. I realized again that Shinyansi could be trusted. Since that's the case, it's better to be more straightforward. I walked up to Shinyansi, smiled at him, and said directly, "Let's eat. After that, we can have a chat." As soon as I finished speaking, Shinyansi's heart instantly exploded. Have a chat? Chat about what? Divorce. I knew there was something wrong with Wen Nan being so abnormal today. What should I do if my wife wants to divorce me? I don't want to live anymore. Should I work overtime tonight, and also tomorrow? Maybe I should just live in the company for this month. Or even for the whole half year. No divorce, no divorce. Heavenly Emperor and Guanyin Bodhisattva, please tell this disciple how to stop my wife from divorcing me. I was suddenly bombarded by Shinyansi's inner thoughts. When I finally listened clearly, I felt rather amused and frustrated at the same time. "What are you standing there for? Let's go." I simply reached out and grabbed his wrist, pulling him downstairs. "I'll talk to you about Wenbei after dinner, don't think too much." The moment I grabbed his wrist, Shinyensi's inner thoughts abruptly stopped. After that, he showed an unusual docility throughout the whole process. When I mentioned Wenbei, he just softly responded with an The noodles cooked by Shinyensi unexpectedly tasted quite good. I didn't hold back and gave him a lot of praise. I praised him so much that while he was washing the dishes, he was thinking about not asking the auntie to come anymore and that he would take care of all the household chores. After Shinyensi finished tidying up, he sat upright on the single sofa next to me. I looked at him, still trying to organize my words on how to start, but he suddenly said, "I have never liked Wenbei, and I didn't treat you as a substitute for her." I paused for a moment, a bit surprised that he would take the initiative to bring up this matter. In my previous life, except for the time when he stopped me from imitating Wenbei's words and deeds, we had never openly discussed this issue. Even during the 3 years of our marriage, the number of our serious conversations could be counted on 2 hands. It was precisely because of this that those people had the opportunity to take advantage of the situation and deceive me out. After a moment of contemplation, I was even more certain that the most pressing matter was to solve the problem of the lack of information communication between Shinyensi and me. Without hesitation, I came straight to the point and said, "There's something I want to apologize to you for." Shinyensi immediately frowned. Nan is apologizing to me. Could it be that she's in some kind of trouble? I just saw Wenbei's diary in your study. I sped up my words to put an end to Shinyensi's inner drama in advance. Sure enough, I saw a flash of shock on his face. I pursed my lips, and in Shinyensi's gradually darkening gaze, I slowly voiced out the question in my heart. "Shinyensi, since you said you've never liked Wenbei, why do you still keep her diary?" The living room became extremely quiet. I slowed down my breathing and focused all my attention on Shinyensi's inner thoughts. Did Nan see that diary? Should I tell her now, or find an excuse to get through this? When I heard the word excuse, I squinted my eyes slightly. However, Shinyensi quickly thought again. Telling her about this might put her in danger, but I don't want to lie to her either. Shinyensi lowered his head slightly. His hair blocked part of his sight, and I couldn't see his expression clearly. However, listening to his inner words, I confirmed my speculation. There was something wrong with Wenbei's death. I pursed my lips, and in an instant, I felt the emotions in my heart surging as if they were about to explode. Shinyensi was still silent. I forcefully suppressed the sour feeling in my heart and said with a slight tremor in my voice, "Shinyensi, I don't have any other family members besides you. Please don't lie to me, okay?" Shinyensi suddenly raised his head and looked at me as if he couldn't believe what I said. I myself couldn't tell how much sincerity and how much use there was in these words, but I could hear the passionate and surging feelings in Shinyensi's heart. This made me not even dare to look into his eyes too much. After a while, Shinyensi stood up and said, "Come to the study with me." In the study, Shinyensi took out Wenbei's diary and handed it to me. "The password is 1121, you'll understand after reading the content." I followed Shinyensi's words and opened the diary. My hands were shaking when I entered the password. Wenbei's diary was indeed a record of her love affairs. She fell in love with someone in university and then started dating him. However, the name of this person never appeared. I flipped through the pages one by one. The earlier part was just some ordinary feelings about being in love. However, when I read further, I couldn't help but frown. "He seems a bit strange recently. Is he facing some trouble?" I asked him, and he said he was in a bad mood and asked me to go on a trip with him to relax. This is our first trip together, and I'm so looking forward to it. Except for these 2 records with a long interval, there was only a photo of a man's back on the following pages. I looked at the back of the man in the photo and felt a bit familiar, but I couldn't remember who he was for a moment. Other than that, there was nothing else recorded in this diary. I looked at Shinyensi in a daze. Shinyensi pursed his lips, as if organizing his words. "A few months before Wenbei's accident, she attended my birthday party. We hadn't been in touch for a long time before that, but that time, she suddenly started reminiscing with me about a research trip we had in junior high school in City Z." Shinyensi walked next to me and took the diary from my hand. "She was called away after saying just a few words and left early soon after. I didn't realize that something was strange about her until after her accident. I'm sorry. If I had noticed it earlier, I might have been able to help her." Shinyensi looked at me with a guilty expression. I shook my head and said softly, "It's not your fault. So you went to City Z?" "Yeah." She mentioned twice that the hotel she stayed in at that time was very comfortable, so I took a business trip there. I got the diary at the front desk, and the password was also told to me by the front desk staff. Shinyensi looked at the page where Wenbei pasted the photo, and after a moment of contemplation, he said, I heard from the front desk that she came with a man that day and stayed for about a week. The diary was found in the corner of the bathroom. When they found the diary, there was an inner page attached to it, written with my name and 4 digits using an eyebrow pencil, and it also said not to make a fuss and wait for me to come and pick it up. You know, those hotels always take the requests of guests like us very seriously. So they kept that diary until I went to inquire and then gave it to me. The more I listened, the tighter my frown became. Wenbei's behavior was really strange. I looked at the man in the photo and pointed at him. Do you know him? Yes, I do. His name is Chu Mulan. I was stunned for a moment, and then I suddenly understood. No wonder he looked familiar to me. This person was quite a famous figure in our circle. He was originally an illegitimate son of the Chu family. Later, he was recognized back into the family, but a few years ago, he suddenly announced that he was breaking away from the Chu family. After that, he started his own business and had been on the rise ever since. Now, he has reached a level where he can completely compete with the Chu family. People privately joke that he is the male protagonist of a contemporary cool story novel. I didn't expect that Wenbei's boyfriend was actually him. Shinyensi tore off the photo of the man from the notebook and held it at an angle towards the light. He pointed it out to me, and then I noticed that there were several scratches on the photo. Shinyensi explained, this is actually a code we set when we participated in a competition at school. These scratches are abbreviations of 2 English words, memory card and password. Memory card and password. What do you mean? I asked in confusion. Shinyensi didn't give a clear answer, but just shook his head. He pasted the photo back and suddenly looked at me very seriously. Nan, I know you're Wenbei's family member, and you care a lot about her affairs, but I haven't found out more about this matter yet, and I can't be sure if there is some kind of danger involved. He paused for a moment and then added softly, or maybe I'm just overthinking it. Hearing this, I lowered my eyes and tugged at the corner of my mouth with a bit of sourness. Shinyensi wasn't overthinking it. Wenbei's behavior was indeed very abnormal, and this matter was indeed dangerous. In my previous life, the two of us had already verified this with our lives once. They all wanted to protect me, so they tried their best to keep me from getting involved in this matter, but the fact proved that being kept in the dark couldn't ensure absolute safety. Only by eliminating the danger from this source and taking the initiative into our own hands could we achieve true victory. I roughly integrated all the things I knew from these 2 lifetimes in my heart, then I raised my head and smiled at Shinyensi. Wenbei must have had no other choice when she came to you at that time. I'm sorry that she dragged you into this dangerous matter even though it had nothing to do with you. Shinyensi shook his head. He seemed to have also realized that I wouldn't believe his excuse of overthinking, so he didn't open his mouth to refute, but I clearly heard him thinking in his heart. In fact, I should thank Wenbei for choosing to tell me about this matter. If Wenbei really offended some dangerous person, it's hard to say that Nan wouldn't be implicated. At least now I still have the opportunity to take the initiative and protect Nan. I felt my heart skip a beat uncontrollably. A feeling of being touched and slightly sour instantly filled my entire chest. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and looked at Shinyensi, and said firmly, Shinyensi, I don't want to do anything that I'll regret anymore. Even if there is danger, I want to know all the truth. I paused for a moment, and then smiled at him. Besides, I have you, right? Hearing my words, Shinyensi was unexpectedly not as excited as I had imagined. He didn't say or think anything. He just looked at me quietly for a few seconds and finally nodded solemnly. After putting away the diary, he urged me to go back and rest, and then he was about to walk out past me. The moment we passed each other, I instinctively grabbed his arm. Shinyensi was taken aback and asked in a low voice, Is there anything else? Tonight, I pursed my lips, my fingers gripping his arm tightened slightly, and I gritted my teeth and said, Can you sleep with me tonight? I don't want to be alone. Crash. The ornament on Shinyensi's desk, which was worth 800,000 yuan, was shattered into pieces. His previously calm inner world was instantly filled with all kinds of incoherent screams. I watched him scurrying around to clean up with amusement. My originally somewhat whiny mood miraculously calmed down. In the evening, for the first time since we got married, Shinyensi and I lay on the same bed, but he only occupied a corner of the bed, to the extent that he would fall off the bed if he turned over. Considering that I had already given him enough shocks today, so I decided to let him off for now. I turned my back to Shinyensi and tried to fall asleep. However, I kept hearing the sound of his inner muttering from behind. Am I going to die? Otherwise, why is Nan Nan being so nice to me today? Could there be something wrong with the last medical examination report? My God, this can't be hospice care, can it? No. I have to find a lawyer to consult tomorrow and see how I can leave more things for Nan Nan after I die. At first, I thought about ignoring Shinyensi's inner thoughts and leaving him alone. However, he just wouldn't stop, and what he said were all things I didn't want to hear. I endured it again and again until I couldn't stand it anymore. I simply turned over, raised my hands and feet, and slapped them onto Shinyensi's body. The world instantly became quiet. I hooked the corner of my mouth in satisfaction and snuggled closer into Shinyensi's arms, holding his body that was as stiff as a zombie. I finally gradually felt sleepy and fell asleep. When I woke up the next day, Shinyensi had already gone to the company. Since I had nothing to do at home, I simply immersed myself in the study to study Wenbei's diary. Wenbei finally chose to give the diary to Shinyensi. It was very likely that the degree of danger of this matter could only be countered by someone with Shinyensi's status, but based on my understanding of Wenbei, she wasn't the kind of person who would forcefully impose danger on others. That meant that this matter might be more serious than we thought. I spent a whole day studying Wenbei's diary, but there were really too few useful clues in the diary. After looking at it over and over again, I still thought that this matter should start with Chu Mulin. I originally planned to discuss it with Shinyensi in the evening, but when he came back from work, he suddenly took the initiative to say to me, "If you don't have any arrangements recently, would you like to come and work in my company?" He paused for a moment and then added, "I have a cooperation project with Chu Mulin recently, and I think you might want to participate." I immediately perked up. I thought it was just what I needed at the right time, and without hesitation, I said, "No problem, I'll start working tomorrow. There's no rush, wait until I finish the handover here, you can come next Monday." Shinyensi said it seriously. I didn't suspect anything. I was just about to tell him some things I thought of when studying Wenbei's diary today. But then I heard him let out a long sigh of relief in his heart and say, "Great, now I can finally be with my wife all day long." Anyway, Nan Nan already knows what she should know. I don't want to live the kind of life where I can't see my wife for at least 8 hours a day. Come to think of it, it shouldn't be a problem to make contact with Chu Mulin within a week, right? Forget it, I'll ask Xiao Zhang to find his phone number for me later. If it doesn't work, I'll just tell Nan Nan that there's something wrong with the project and think of other ways. During this week, I just watched coldly as Shinyensi kept answering calls and working overtime at home. When it was time for me to go to the company and start working as we had agreed, he really managed to establish contact with Chu Mulin. The two of us looked at the project plan in his office and both felt that things were going a bit too smoothly. I'm afraid that Chu Mulin has already sensed something. Not only do we want to find him, but he might also want to find us. Sure enough, the subsequent project promotion was very efficient. As Shinyensi's secretary, I accompanied him to several meetings and finally met Chu Mulin in person. He looked gentle and refined in person. He would put on a smile when talking to anyone, making people feel very friendly. But maybe because of my preconceived notions, I always felt that his smile was very false. Moreover, I always felt that he was sizing me up intentionally or unintentionally. I pretended not to notice and focused on my work throughout. It wasn't until the meeting ended and Chu Mulin shook hands with Shinyensi to say goodbye, I then pretended to look at him casually and happened to meet his gaze. Chu Mulin seemed to be surprised that I would suddenly look at him and was clearly taken aback, but in an instant, he composed himself completely, smiled politely at me, and then left on the pretext of work. There was no sign of anything abnormal at all. I frowned slightly as I looked at his back. My intuition told me that he wanted to say something to me. It was just that he didn't take action because the occasion wasn't right. But what was there about me that was worthy of his attention? After all, I didn't even know that he had been in a relationship with Wenbei. There was no reason for him to approach me, or was it because of Shinyensi? Even though I had lived 2 lifetimes, the clues I had were still too few. My mind was a bit confused, especially when I thought about the ending between Shinyensi and me in my previous life. Just thinking about the way he was covered in blood at the end, lying there with his body cold, made me feel extremely irritable. Subconsciously, I reached out and held Shinyensi's hand beside me. The temperature of his palm was very high, and the heat gradually passed to my hand through the place where our skin touched. Feeling this real warmth, I finally felt my heartbeat gradually calm down. and I finally noticed Shinyensi's noisy inner thoughts beside me again. Why did Nan Nan stare at that Chumulin for so long? The guy has been gone for ages, and she's still looking. Even if she suspects him, she shouldn't be so fascinated, right? Could it be that Nan Nan likes the type of Chumulin? What's so good about him except that he can smile a bit more than me? Maybe I should find a doctor and see if I can get a smile lip done. I'm here racking my brains and exhausting myself over the enemy in the dark. This love-struck guy is actually thinking about a smile lip. I was so angry that I laughed. I let go of his hand and pinched his arm hard. Shinyensi didn't cry out in pain, but just looked at me blankly. What's wrong? Nothing. I just suddenly feel a bit worried about my future. I looked at him, squinted my eyes, and smiled falsely. Shinyensi, if I die, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. After going back that day, Shinyensi was well behaved for a while. Mainly, he kept thinking about why I suddenly got angry, and at least he didn't have the time to think about a smile lip anymore. However, through this incident, I suddenly began to realize. I can hear Shinyensi's inner thoughts now and know what he's thinking, but Shinyensi doesn't know what I'm thinking. The kidnapping, the rebirth, Wenbei's diary. I've been focusing all my energy on these things during this period, so much so that I've gotten used to directly listening to Shinyensi's inner thoughts to understand him, completely ignoring the need to take the initiative to deal with this relationship with Shinyensi. Shinyensi is clearly full of unease about our relationship now. But then again, as far as I can remember, I don't seem to have done anything excessive to Shinyensi, right? Why does it seem like he takes it for granted that I'll hate him? I secretly sized up Shinyensi, who had entered his working state. I have to admit that when there are no messy inner thoughts ruining the atmosphere, Shinyensi is indeed a very charming man, coupled with the fact that I now clearly know all the things he has done for me over such a long time. It seems like a very natural thing to fall in love with him. I never considered this direction before because of various reasons. Now that I've thought of it, I won't run away from my feelings. The ability to read minds came out of nowhere, and I don't know when it will disappear. I want to live on with Shinyensi and spend a lifetime together. Some things have to be said by us ourselves. After figuring this out, I plan to find a suitable opportunity to have an open talk with Shinyensi. However, in the next month or so, we worked overtime until we were completely exhausted. We not only had to catch up on the progress of the project with Chumulin, Shinyensi was also using his connections to investigate what had happened before Wenbei's accident. I was so busy that I almost went to buy some quick-acting heart-relieving pills and keep them in the office. As for having a romantic talk or confessing to Shinyensi, I didn't have the slightest bit of energy to spare. We kept being busy like this until the weather turned completely cold. Shinyensi suddenly brought back 2 invitation letters. I took them and took a look, and instantly perked up. An invitation letter to Chumulin's birthday party. November 21st is actually his birthday, no wonder. Thinking of the password to open Wenbei's diary, my hand holding the invitation letter trembled a bit. Wenbei mentioned the password. Since it's Chumulin's birthday, this matter must be related to him. I felt that Chumulin had something to say to me during the meeting that day. I'll see if I can talk to him on his birthday. I looked at Shinyensi and smiled slightly under his obscure gaze, with a bit of a soothing meaning. I took the initiative to place my hand on the back of his hand and said softly, "Don't worry, I won't be out of your sight." As soon as I finished speaking, I indeed heard the sound of Shinyensi heaving a sigh of relief in his heart. Then he thought again. Nan Nan doesn't seem to hate me that much recently. Is it because I'm helping her investigate Wenbei's matter? Forget it, it doesn't matter. As long as she's happy, that's enough. I was stunned when I heard this, and my heart couldn't help but be moved. However, before I could savor it properly, Shinyensi's inner thoughts took a turn and he said, "It's not easy for Nan Nan to start accepting me now. I must break the rumor of the substitute, find 2 people to act out a scene. Let them come in front of us and mention the matter of the substitute loudly. In this way, I can clarify it logically and also take the opportunity to warn others not to spread rumors randomly. Okay, that's it. Let Xiaozhang contact them in the evening and hire 2 people with good acting skills. Don't let it slip." When it came to Chumulin's birthday, I somehow found an excuse to dispel Shinyensi's embarrassing idea. However, although it was an excuse, I did have some other thoughts about the matter of the substitute. On the first day of my rebirth, I heard Shinyensi say in his heart that he had made a clarification, including in my previous life. Shinyensi had denied it to me more than once, but I only misunderstood because I saw the substantial thing like Wenbei's diary. why did other people firmly believe it, at least, considering the situations in both lifetimes? I think there must be someone fueling the flames behind this. And spreading such a rumor must also have some other purpose, perhaps, it's to drive a wedge between Shinyensi and me. Shinyensi and I discussed and agreed that we would pretend to be on bad terms and act separately when we arrived at the scene. After half of the banquet was over, Chumulin finally couldn't hold back and walked towards me. I pretended to know nothing and exchanged a few pleasantries with him. Sure enough, he took the initiative to mention his relationship with Wenbei. I feigned shock. He didn't say more, just pursed his lips extremely restrainedly. I saw his eyes gradually turn a bit red. That kind of restrained and genuine sadness made me almost dispel my suspicion of him in an instant. Before I could react, he had already composed himself and smiled at me. Let's exchange contact information. If you have any trouble, you can come to me, and I'll help you. I think Wenbei would also want you to be happy, whether in life or in love. After he finished speaking, he seemed to casually glance in the direction of Shinyensi. I followed his gaze. Shinyensi happened to glance in our direction and then indifferently looked away. It was as if he really didn't care about me at all. I withdrew my gaze, didn't say more, and just exchanged a knowing and bitter smile with Chumulin. I added his contact information. It wasn't until the end of the banquet that I met up with Shinyensi again. After we met, I noticed that his state was a bit strange. He was absent-minded when I talked to him on the way home. I simply fell silent too. It wasn't until we were near home that I heard him say almost indifferently in his heart, "I'm still too useless." I remained silent, got out of the car first, and left without waiting for him. I washed up, tidied up, and went back to the bedroom. It wasn't until he came to the bedside that I suddenly reached out when he wasn't paying attention and pushed him down on the bed. Shinyensi leaned against the headboard and looked at me in surprise. I pressed his shoulders with both hands and looked at him seriously face to face. Shinyensi finally had some flustered voices in his heart. I listened quietly, and after a while, I slowly said, "Shinyensi, for our plan today, did you not want to do it?" Shinyensi seemed not to have expected me to ask this and didn't respond for a moment. I waited patiently. And it was only after a few seconds that he lowered his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't worry, I won't ruin the plan." I was so angry that I laughed at him. "Shinyensi, did I accuse you? I was just asking if you didn't want to do it." His expression became even more confused. I heard him say in his heart in an extremely matter-of-fact tone, "It doesn't matter whether I want to or not. After all, Nan wants to do this." It seemed that he really hadn't considered himself at all. Whether he was happy or willing didn't matter. As long as this plan was something I wanted to complete, he would definitely do his best to help me. I knew his thoughts very well. I was touched and also very happy, but this wasn't okay. If Shinyensi kept suppressing himself and ignoring his emotions like this, his state would definitely have problems after a long time. I took a deep breath gently. I felt that besides these emotions in my heart, there was also a faint, uncontrollable restlessness. I looked directly into his eyes and intensified the tone. "Shinyensi, I'm asking you again, didn't you want to do it?" He opened his mouth slightly, avoiding my gaze. "It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter my ass." I really felt like I was hitting a piece of cotton with a punch. I was so angry that I didn't know what to say. I let go of his shoulders, stretched out my finger, and pointed at the position of his heart. I was both angry and amused as I said, "Shinyensi, it was you who helped me pay off the huge debt after my family's accident, and it was also you who somehow wanted to marry me. I know all the big and small things you've done for me in the past 2 years. I'm not a fool. All your actions clearly show that you like me. Why is it so difficult for you to say this from your mouth?" Shinyensi slowly widened his eyes and looked at me in disbelief. I had thought for so long about the right opportunity and the right words. But I didn't expect that in a fit of excitement, I just blurted out these words. Many things become easier once they have a beginning. Regardless of Shinyensi's expression, I continued to point at his heart and said, "Shinyensi, if you want me to accept you, you have to let me know what you're thinking. I don't have the ability to read minds. How can I understand if you don't say anything? Or is it that I've been flattering myself from the beginning to the end? Do you actually plan to become a monk after you turn 30, and being nice to me now is just about doing good deeds and accumulating virtue?" "I don't. No, it's you, you don't." He instinctively denied me anxiously. However, he stopped halfway through his words. I didn't let him go and continued to ask, "I don't have what, you don't?" His expression gradually showed a painful entanglement. I felt his chest heaving more and more. After a long time, he said word by word with difficulty, "You're not flattering yourself." After saying this, he seemed to deflate like a punctured balloon, and his body instantly slumped down. I saw him avoid my gaze. I heard a voice in his heart that was almost desolate and said flatly, Nan has seen it. She'll probably hate me even more." Right, hate, why? I was so surprised by Shinyensi's inner thoughts that I accidentally blurted out the words, but Shinyensi didn't seem to hear me. I simply patted him and directly asked my question. "By the way, Shinyensi, you seem to have always thought that I hate you. Why do you think so?" He came back to his senses and frowned slightly. "Didn't you hate me before, since your sophomore year of high school? You suddenly cut off all private contact with me. You didn't pay much attention to me when we met usually, and your attitude towards me became very cold. You should have hated me, right? Moreover, after the accident in your family this time, I took advantage of the situation and forced you to marry me." Wait a moment, you mean high school? I never expected that the source of this matter could be traced back so long ago. I thought about it carefully and explained absurdly. "Back in my sophomore year of high school. I thought you were going to get married in an arranged marriage with Wenbei. How could I still maintain private contact with my sister's fiancé? When did I say I was going to have an arranged marriage with Wenbei?" Shinyensi suddenly sat up straight from the headboard and looked at me in disbelief. I spread my hands helplessly and said, "I heard my parents chatting about it. Maybe the adults had that intention, I'm not really sure." Shinyensi pursed his lips, seemingly unable to accept it for a moment. I heard that his inner thoughts had completely turned into a series of interjections due to excessive shock. I found it funny and simply poked his shoulder and snorted, "See, if you had directly told me that you liked me at that time, there wouldn't have been so many problems. I didn't like you at that time. When I heard that you were going to marry my sister, I definitely had to keep my distance from you." Finally, a trace of regret appeared on Shinyensi's face. I pressed on with my advantage and said, "I'm telling you, don't think that now that we're married and have the marriage certificate, everything is fine. Trust and honesty are the foundation of marriage. If you still don't say anything in the future and make me guess, then if I guess wrong, misunderstand you, and don't like you anymore, it will be your own fault. Do you understand?" Shinyensi's expression tightened, and he suddenly looked at me, his eyes faintly shining with anticipation. "Not like me in the future, so you now." I nodded with a smile. Shinyensi's breath suddenly caught in his throat. The first thing he felt wasn't even joy but confusion. I could hear Shinyensi's inner thoughts. I knew that although he was love-struck every day in his heart, but in fact, he had never dared to think even once that I would like him too. In the balance of our relationship, he had placed himself in a lower position from the very beginning. He could give everything for me, even his life, and I didn't need to repay him for anything. I looked at the surprised and at a loss expression on his face, which was like that of a child who had received candy for the first time. I suddenly didn't want to ask the remaining questions. My heart seemed to be gently gripped by a hand, aching with a sour and bitter feeling. Those hidden affections, those bloody acts of protection. Scene after scene played out before my eyes, gradually blurring my vision. Suddenly, I propped myself up and, before Shinyensi could react, turned and sat on his lap. Words were no longer enough to convey my emotions at this moment. I cupped Shinyensi's face and looked at him tenderly yet firmly. "Shinyensi, I love you. Right now, I urgently need you to fulfill your duties as a husband. You'd better accept reality quickly, or I might change my mind." As soon as I finished speaking, I felt a force of weightlessness, and Shinyensi and I switched positions. Outside the window, the dark clouds covering the moon slowly drifted away with the wind blowing from afar. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but at least, at this moment, the moonlight bathed everything, bright and clear. After that day, Shinyensi's demeanor clearly changed. Specifically, he became even more clingy, and probably because we had cleared up some misunderstandings, he was no longer as reserved as before. Although he still didn't talk much, I knew these things took time. After all, I could still hear his inner thoughts, so I wasn't worried about any misunderstandings. Moreover, recently, Chu Mulan had been contacting me much more frequently. Most of our energy was still focused on this matter. When Chu Mulan reached out to me, he didn't ask me out. Instead, we chatted online. Most of our conversations were about Wenbei. From our chats, I learned that he and Wenbei got together during their sophomore year of college. At first, he didn't let Wenbei go public with their relationship. It was because he felt that his status as an illegitimate child wasn't good enough for Wenbei. Later, After he left the Chu family and succeeded in starting his own business, he proposed to Wenbei, but he never expected that Wenbei would be in a car accident. I was skeptical of his words but still pretended to be sad to cooperate with him. I also noticed that although his hints were subtle when chatting with me, he was indeed insinuating that Shin Yanxi had always liked Wenbei. He said that Shin Yanxi used to always hover around Wenbei and did many affectionate things for her. When Shin Yanxi saw this chat record, he mentally cursed Chu Mulan's ancestors. Slander, it's all slander. I didn't have frequent private contacts with Wenbei at all. I soothed him amusedly while continuing to play along with Chu Mulan. I maintained contact with Chu Mulan online while also pretending to have a strained relationship with Shin Yanxi in public. Shin Yanxi acted as if he didn't care about me, and I acted as if I didn't trust him. In this way, we moved in with Chu Mulan for several months. It wasn't until the following spring that Chu Mulan finally started tentatively mentioning some requests to me. By then, all our conversations had tacitly accepted the premise that Shin Yanxi liked Wenbei. Chu Mulan seemingly accidentally brought up in the flow of conversation. He said that he and Wenbei had a commemorative USB drive, which contained some videos that weren't suitable for others to see. That USB drive should have been left at Wenbei's home, but the house had been bought by Shin Yanxi. He said that since Shin Yanxi knew about his relationship with Wenbei, Shin Yanxi would never agree to give him Wenbei's things, so he asked if I could help get that USB drive for him. My heart trembled when I read these words. I knew we were finally getting close to the deepest hidden secret. To be honest, we hadn't stopped investigating in these past few months, but apart from confirming that Chu Mulan was the one spreading the substitute rumor, everything else seemed to have hit a dead end. I couldn't help but feel excited when I saw Chu Mulan's request. But the USB drive he mentioned also made me very curious. I told Shin Yanxi about it. He looked solemn and pondered. I'm sure the clue Wenbei left was a memory card, not a USB drive. Strangely enough, Shin Yanxi's words made me even more suspicious of the USB drive. After thinking it over, I didn't agree to Chu Mulan's request. I also vaguely implied that I didn't have the right to make demands on Shin Yanxi and might not be able to enter my former home again. Chu Mulan didn't force me, he just said he would find another way. But a few days later, Shin Yanxi and I had a big fight at the company because of the substitute rumor. Coincidentally, it was heard by passing colleagues and spread. That night, I took the initiative to contact Chu Mulan and asked him for more details about the USB drive. Chu Mulan called me directly and said, it's an ordinary white USB drive, but the 4 numbers 1121 are engraved on it. My heart skipped a beat, and I blurted out, your birthday. Yeah, his voice was still gentle and refined. But it's also the day we first met. I saw her in the school auditorium and fell in love at first sight. I'll never forget that day. Actually, we went back there once before Wenbei's accident. It was our 6th anniversary. We recorded some things and saved them on this USB drive. This USB drive really holds many memories for me. It means a lot to me. When Nan, I can only count on you for this. Please help me. Not until the call ended did I feel like my heart was about to jump out of my throat. I suddenly had a bold guess. When Shin Yanxi came back, I pulled him into the study and took out Wenbei's diary. Pointing at the 2 clues Wenbei left, I told Shin Yanxi about my phone call with Chu Mulan. Shin Yanxi immediately understood and said, you think Wenbei hid the memory card in our university auditorium? It's possible. I didn't want to be too certain. After a moment of thought, Shin Yanxi said he would send someone to look for it. I nodded and brought up another concern. This USB drive, I have a feeling it's real. Should I go back home? I looked at Shin Yanxi, seeking his advice, but Shin Yanxi looked at me seriously. I heard him think, Nan will be sad if she goes back to the Wen family now. But what should I do? I can't stop her from going home forever. I didn't expect that would be Shin Yanxi's first reaction. To be honest, I hadn't even thought about it. My heart felt like it had been submerged in a huge swimming pool filled with marshmallows. It turned sweet and soft in an instant. I opened my arms, and Shin Yanxi naturally pulled me into his embrace, leaning against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I said, come with me. I have a hunch that we won't lose this time, so whether it's a disguise or the truth, let's witness it together. A few days later, Shin Yanxi and I went back to the Wen family's old villa. It was the first time I'd been back since the Wen family's accident. Before, I was afraid of being reminded of the past. Now, with Shin Yanxi by my side, it didn't seem so sad. The house remained exactly as it was before my parents' accident. Shin Yanxi and I searched for the USB drive separately. Surprisingly, We found it in my parents' room. The USB drive was locked in a small safe by my parents. I was shocked when I found it, because the password I used to open the safe was the one my parents usually used. This meant my parents had hidden it there. But why did my parents have the USB drive that Chu Mulin was looking for? Could it be that what Wenbei was investigating was also related to my parents? My mind went completely blank. I instinctively looked at Shenyansi, only to find him unexpectedly calm, without a trace of surprise. It was as if he had known all along. I calmed down and tried to listen to his inner thoughts, but his mind was unusually quiet. Shenyansi frowned slightly, his eyes fixed on the USB drive. As if contemplating something, I called his name, and he seemed to gradually come back to his senses. Shenyansi turned to look at me but didn't come close as he usually did. Unexpectedly, he said, Nan, I just found out something recently. I think I know what business Chu Mulin is really doing. My heart trembled, and I whispered, what is it? Human trafficking. Shenyansi emphasized each word. My eyes widened in shock. Human trafficking. Are you sure? Shenyansi nodded. I'm afraid that's what Wenbei was trying to expose, and maybe your parents knew about it too. I understood every word Shenyansi said, but when they came together as a sentence, I couldn't make sense of it. Shenyansi's voice turned cold. Chu Mulin is involved in human trafficking in Southeast Asia. I used some connections to investigate, although I haven't got conclusive evidence yet. I'm pretty sure. I stared at the USB drive in front of me, forcing myself to calm down and think about what Shenyansi said. Shenyansi continued, about 2 years ago. One of Chu Mulin's shipping routes along the southeast coast was reported. At the same time, his entire funding chain along the southeast coast was completely cut off. He managed to cover his tracks, but he suffered heavy losses and was almost caught. Shenyansi looked up at me, his gaze unreadable. I covered my mouth with my hand, feeling my breathing grow heavy. Shenyansi said word by word, it was your parents who did it. When my suspicion was confirmed, I couldn't catch my breath and started coughing violently. Shenyansi rushed over immediately to pat my back and help me catch my breath. I waved my hand. I coughed so hard that my stomach started churning, and I barely managed to stop. When I opened my mouth, my voice was hoarse beyond recognition. I cleared my throat and then said with difficulty and confusion, my parents, yeah, I don't know the details, but I'm certain it was your parents who did it back then. Shenyansi handed me a glass of water. He had always hired people to maintain this house. Looking at the familiar and tidy room, I felt as if my parents had just gone out and would come back laughing and chatting any moment. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something but not knowing where to start. I even began to wonder if this so-called rebirth was just a hallucination before my death. I felt as if my soul had left my body and floated into the air. I was lost, not knowing which way to go. When Nan, listen to me. I have to send her away. Chu Mulin will never let her go. Two voices rang in my ears simultaneously, like a bomb. It jolted my wandering soul back into my body. I reacted a beat too late. In that short moment, I heard Shenyansi say gently but firmly, I bought you a plane ticket to Countryar tonight. I've arranged for someone to pick you up there. I will definitely get to the bottom of this. I'll find out what really happened to Wenbei and your parents. I won't let Chu Mulin go. You've helped me investigate him enough. The more I listened, the more I wanted to shut him up. Shenyansi must have planned all this in advance, which was why he had been standing a few steps away from me. Before I could actually cover his mouth, I shouted sharply, Shenyansi, shut up. Shenyansi ignored me. He even smiled at me, his handsome face full of undisguised love. Nan, be good. After what your family did, Chu Mulin will never spare you. Go to Countryar tonight. There's an old friend of my grandfather there, and no one will dare to touch you. Just wait for me. I'll take care of everything you're worried about, and then I'll come and get you. Looking at Shenyansi's determined expression, I knew there was no changing his mind. Even if I refused, he would probably force me to leave the country. Suddenly, I understood why Shenyansi distanced himself from me and later wanted a divorce during the last year of our previous life. He must have found out about all this back then. In our previous life, I hadn't had direct contact with Chu Mulin, and my relationship with Shenyansi was cold and strained, so Shenyansi didn't insist on sending me abroad. Our relationship was different in this life. But it seemed Shenyansi hadn't changed at all. He still wanted me to live while he was willing to risk his life. I knew very well. I went over every detail of my relationship with Shenyansi from our previous life to this life in my mind. Instead of responding to what Shenyansi said, after a long pause, I suddenly asked, Shenyansi, I've heard many people say that the Shin family's rise wasn't through ordinary means. They say that all of you in the Shin family are cold-blooded, ruthless, and willing to do anything to achieve your goals, with no genuine feelings for anyone. I've never asked you before, why do you like me so much? After I finished speaking, I casually pulled a chair and sat down. Although Shin Yancy and I had confessed our feelings to each other, it seemed I had overlooked something. Now that we knew we loved each other and had cleared up the misunderstandings, there was no reason for Shin Yancy to still see himself as the inferior one in our relationship. There must be something I didn't know. I was prepared for a long, drawn-out discussion with Shin Yancy. However, to my surprise, after a moment of silence, Shin Yancy said, "I'm not good at expressing things like this." "I know. Take your time," I replied softly but firmly. Shin Yancy had been better at expressing his emotions in front of me recently. Although I didn't know why something as simple as expressing feelings was so difficult for him, I wasn't in a hurry. I was willing to wait. But since he was pushing me now, I had to be more assertive. He gave me a slightly helpless look. I heard him sigh in his mind. Then, he finally began to speak slowly and clumsily. "My family is indeed quite different from ordinary ones. Since I can remember, the most common thing I heard was that emotions are the most useless things, and only money, power, and status matter. Therefore, the education I've received has always been about how to become cold-blooded and ruthless and climb to a higher position." He paused and let out a sigh. Strangely, I felt that he seemed a bit more relaxed. Maybe he'd decided to just let it all go, I thought to myself, but still waited patiently for him to continue. "All the children in my family have to take a special class at a very young age, which is about how to get rid of useless emotions, such as feelings of compassion, sympathy, and other forms of tenderness. This class doesn't teach anything else. They just prepare a puppy and a knife, and what I'm supposed to do is kill the puppy with the knife." "What the hell, that's crazy." I couldn't hold back and blurted out. Shin Yancy smiled, and I almost wanted to stop him from talking, but if I stopped him now, I didn't know if I'd ever get another chance to hear him say these things. So I endured and waited for him to gradually reveal the real him to me. Shin Yancy continued. "I was just a child then, and of course, I couldn't bring myself to do it. They locked me up, without food or water. I wouldn't be able to get out unless I killed the puppy." Shin Yancy spoke calmly, "But all I wanted was to go back in time and get rid of those who had forced him." "Did you do it in the end?" I asked softly, my voice trembling slightly. Shin Yancy let out a bitter laugh and shook his head, full of self-mockery. "Yes, I did. I cut myself a few times, got some blood on me, and then threw the dog out through the only vent. When the person watching me came to check on me and saw that I was covered in blood, they opened the door. I told them the dog had tried to attack me, and I'd killed it and thrown it out. I knew that if they couldn't find the puppy's body and the blood on me didn't contain animal blood, they'd easily figure out I was lying. But at my age and with my abilities back then, that was the best I could do." I gritted my teeth and endured for a while, then suddenly stood up. I walked over and hugged him, wanting to offer some comfort. He stiffened for a moment, then gently stroked my head before continuing. "After saying that, I fainted because I was too weak. But when I woke up again, I heard that they detected animal blood in the blood on me and also found the puppy's body. I barely passed that test. It was only later that I learned an aunt who was close to my mother had helped me. The aunt told me that she'd been closely watching and trying to find a way to help me during those days I was locked up, and she'd heard what I said as soon as I said it." Coincidentally, my second younger brother was also taking that class at the time, and we used puppies from the same litter, which looked very similar. I was probably the only one in my family who resisted that task extremely. Anyway, my second younger brother completed it smoothly. The aunt was in charge of disposing of the used props, so she used that puppy's body to help me get away with it. Shin Yancy gave a self-deprecating smile. "Even though I managed to get through it, I don't think the puppy could have survived. It was very young, hadn't eaten or drunk anything for days, and was already very weak. The vent I threw it out of was very high. Even if it didn't die from the fall, it wouldn't have had the strength to go out and seek help. Besides, that high-end residential area was remote, so it was almost certain to die. So, no matter how you look at it, I'm actually the murderer, and I can't escape that." I always told myself that. However, I never expected that a few years later, when I went back with Wenbei to get exam materials, I unexpectedly saw it again. My heart skipped a beat, and I stared at him in shock. Shin Yancy's voice became hoarse and even trembled slightly. "Those people in the Shin family wouldn't notice. But I'd been with that puppy for several days, and I knew there was a small flaw on its nose. I couldn't be mistaken, so I was almost stunned, unable to believe it, when Bae told me that her younger sister had found the puppy outside a few years ago. The puppy had been on the verge of death at that time, looking like it was about to die. But her younger sister didn't want to give up and took it to the hospital, and surprisingly, it was saved. Then their family adopted the puppy. I suddenly pushed Shinyensi away, my mouth wide open in disbelief. You mean Chocho? I did save a dying puppy in the neighborhood when I was a child. The puppy had a broken hind leg and always limped even after it was cured. I never thought it was. Shinyensi curved his lips, looking at me deeply, and nodded solemnly. His eyes were slightly red, and his voice was full of restraint. He said, Nan, you probably can't imagine how I felt at that moment. In a place like the Shin family, emotions are worthless. There's no family affection, no trust, you can't be weak, and you can't show any vulnerability, or you'll die. Most of my older brothers and sisters died in infighting for power and profit, even though I didn't want to accept that way of life. After all these years, I was almost ready to give in, but at that moment, you made me realize that my resistance had been meaningful. Nan, do you know, at that moment, I felt like I was saved. He smiled happily, but I couldn't hold back anymore. With tears streaming down my face, I kissed him. I finally understood why he had been suppressing his feelings, why simple expressions were so difficult for him, and I also finally understood why he had gone to such lengths, even though he knew that investigating Chu Mulan's affairs would be extremely dangerous. He still didn't hesitate. It wasn't just for me. Perhaps in his heart, there had always been that pure kindness and respect for life that the child within him had originally possessed. I pushed him away, crying so hard that I could barely breathe. He gently kissed the tears off my face and whispered in my ear tenderly, Nan, the reason I'm standing here today is that you saved me. But I also know very well that my feelings for you are no longer just gratitude, no matter from which perspective. I should help you and have every reason to protect your safety. He pressed his forehead against mine and said softly, Nan, I don't want to feel powerless again. I leaned against Shinyensi, and it took a long time for my emotions to calm down. In Shinyensi's mind, he probably still felt that he owed me a debt of gratitude, even though saving that puppy was just a random act on my part. But he had taken it upon himself to repay that debt, gratitude and love. These are the two most complex and heavy emotions in the world. Shinyensi carried both of them, which was why he had always placed me on a pedestal in his heart. I finally understood it all. But why should I accept his self-imposed offering? We're just a couple who love each other. I composed myself, pushed him away, and stared at him seriously. Shinyensi, tell me, what do you plan to do after you send me away? Shinyensi thought to himself, after I take over the Shin family, I can restore those severed relationships. I will definitely make Chu Mulan pay the price. But what he said aloud was, I'll just do some business with him. As long as he leaves you alone in the future, that'll be fine. Hearing these two completely different statements, I sneered. Shinyensi, do you think I'm stupid? Let me ask you, isn't what Chu Mulan is doing extremely hateful? Doesn't he deserve to die 1,000 times? Shinyensi nodded seriously. I was so angry with him that I didn't know what to say. I simply slapped him on the head, then call the police. When Bae might not have been able to report it, but you surely can. What he's done is enough to get him executed 1,000 times over. Shinyensi rarely looked so stunned when it came to serious matters. I heard him think, but even if we catch him and sentence him to death, it's too easy for him. I gritted my teeth, looking at him with a sense of frustration. Considering the environment he grew up in, it wasn't surprising that he thought this way, but I couldn't let him do this. I thought of many things to say, but when it came to it, I didn't know how to put them into words. Finally, I let out a long sigh and said, Shinyensi, I know you have your ways. You want to catch him with your own hands and make him suffer. You don't want him to die easily. I also want to kill him with my own hands. But then what would be the point of everything you've done for me? When Bae, my parents, and Shinyensi, they had protected me until the very last moment, hoping that I could live a good life. I'm investigating Wenbei's diary and delving into Chu Mulan's dangerous business because I don't want my loved ones to die in vain. But not avoiding danger doesn't mean I want to seek death, I said seriously to Shinyensi. I don't know what you're thinking. Are you planning to die with Chu Mulan? But from the beginning to the end, I've only wanted us to live together. Of course, if there's no other choice and we end up dying, that's just how it is. But I will never look down on my life. and I will never seek revenge at the cost of my life, so, Shinyensi, don't sacrifice your life to repay a debt of gratitude, and don't sacrifice your life to protect me. We will find the truth, stop him, and make him pay the price. Suddenly, I relaxed, tilted my head at him, and smiled. Shinyensi. After this is all over, come with me to see Wenbei and my parents. Let's tell them everything has been resolved and put their minds at ease. Then we can also tell them about our marriage. We've come this far, the evidence and the truth are all just one step away. We need to make him pay the price and also ensure that we can be together in the future. To achieve this, there's only one way, isn't there? I saw Shinyensi's eyes flicker, and his expression gradually relaxed. I leaned in and kissed him, then buried my head in his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body. Finally, I said, Shinyensi, let's make a choice that benefits both of us. I finally managed to persuade Shinyensi. We hadn't called the police before because we weren't sure whether Wenbei's and my parents' deaths were accidents. Not to mention Wenbei's ambiguous diary, but now that we had some evidence of Chu Mulan's crimes, calling the police was indeed the best option. With the Shin family's influence, Chu Mulan wouldn't be able to stop us. We quickly began to take action. However, I never expected that Chu Mulan would also act in advance. In my previous life, I was tricked into going out, so in this life, I naturally thought Chu Mulan would find an excuse to invite me out, but unexpectedly, I was knocked out directly while I was out. When I woke up, I found myself chained up in a room. This place was quite familiar to me. It was the same place I was taken to when I was kidnapped in my previous life. Unlike last time, there was someone in front of me this time. Chu Mulan was still wearing a well-tailored white shirt. He was sitting at the table with his head resting on his hand, smiling gently at me. The moment our eyes met, I heard him say in a warm and friendly voice, "You're awake." I sat up almost instinctively, my nerves instantly on edge. Chu Mulan smiled and shook his head. "Don't be nervous. I just invited you here to ask you something." Invited? I shook the chains on my body and said sarcastically. Chu Mulan didn't seem to care. He took out a USB drive and played with it casually. The moment I saw the USB drive clearly, I was stunned. I'd actually just gone out to throw out the trash. And before that, I'd just finished watching the contents of the USB drive left by Wenbei. The content was unexpected. I didn't quite understand it, so I'd been deep in thought and didn't realize I'd brought the USB drive with me. I fell silent, but Chu Mulan seemed to misunderstand. He walked up to me with the USB drive, bent slightly, and looked down at me. There was still a gentle smile on his face, but his voice was icy cold. "I've already seen the contents of the USB drive. This USB drive is fake, isn't it?" His tone was so certain that it made me suspicious. I remained calm and told the truth. "It's real," Chu Mulan sneered. "When Nan, we're at this point, there's no need for you to keep pretending." His eyes grew colder. "To be honest with you, before Wenbei died, I found out that she was trying to send out a message, but I stopped her. I couldn't figure out who she was trying to ask for help, but no matter how I thought about it, Shinyensi was the most likely person. So I've been keeping an eye on him for the past 2 years. When you two suddenly reached out to me, I immediately suspected that you knew something. Sure enough, after just a little probing, you actually went to the Wen family's house and found the USB drive. Not only that, but Shinyensi even found out about my business. There's no point in you pretending to know nothing now, is there?" I didn't show any reaction on the surface to what he said, but I was secretly shocked. It seemed that our hasty approach had confirmed for him that Wenbei had given the evidence to Shinyensi. No wonder when we approached him, it felt like he also wanted to find us. Even the address of the Wen family's house was probably his guess or test. Unexpectedly, he'd guessed right. We'd been too careless. I felt a bit regretful. After pursing my lips and remaining silent for a while, I slowly said, "So, was this USB drive what Wenbei was trying to pass on at that time?" Chu Mulan nodded generously. "Yes, but I discovered it before she could send it out that time. She was quite smart, though. She had a backup plan and didn't carry the USB drive with her. I actually used some methods to get out of her what was on it later, but she stubbornly refused to say where she had hidden it. I wasted my sincere invitation for her to make money with us before. I even took her to our core base and showed her our punishment scene. Turns out she pretended to join us, but secretly collected evidence to stab me in the back. She was really hateful." Hearing his words, I suddenly widened my eyes and exclaimed in a voice that lost its usual pitch, "What methods did you use? What did you do to her?" Chu Mulan remained unmoved and even smiled at me. "Don't be so fierce. your sisters, Wenbei was much gentler than you. As he spoke, he walked towards the table. Of course, I used some methods to make her talk. You should already know what business I'm in, right? He walked back to the table and sat down, playing with the USB drive casually as he said indifferently, our business mainly involves exporting overseas. Coincidentally, your family's shipping business in the southern and southeastern coastal areas is doing very well, and Wenbei was, without a doubt, the successor of your family's company. Of course, if you were the successor, I would have chased you back then. After saying that, he smiled at me. I felt a physical sense of nausea. He continued. You know, our business dealing with people is different from dealing with cats and dogs. Animals are obedient, but human consciousness is too strong, so they're not easy to manage. For those who try to run away, we don't directly get rid of them when we catch them. We bring them back to the base and call everyone else to witness the fate of those who try to escape. The fear in people's hearts is much more effective than iron chains. After seeing others being tortured to death, they don't dare to have the idea of running away. Of course, since I wanted Wenbei to join us, I naturally had to let her know about these things, which is why I took her to see the punishment scene, but I never expected that she would do such a thing even knowing our methods. She was really stupid. I was so angry that I couldn't speak for a moment and could only stare at him fiercely. Chu Mulan put away that false smile, and his expression immediately turned cold and ruthless. After Wenbei agreed to join us, I had someone keep an eye on her 24 hours a day. I really didn't expect that, even in such a situation, she could still find the opportunity to collect evidence. By the way, can you tell me how Wenbei managed to get in touch with Xin Yanxi? She was clearly stopped by me when she tried to send the message, but Xin Yanxi still found out. I really can't figure it out. I snorted disdainfully. If you can't figure it out, it just shows that you're stupid. You scumbag. Sure enough, Wenbei didn't not want to call the police. She couldn't. Say whatever you want. In the end, you've all lost to me, haven't you? Chu Mulan casually threw the USB drive into the trash can, wiped his hands, and said indifferently, since the USB drive you have is fake, the real one must be with Xin Yanxi. He should be here soon. The three of us can finally have a good talk face to face. My heart skipped a beat. And my first reaction was to worry if Xin Yanxi was following our plan. I was kidnapped so suddenly this time that I was really worried he would act impulsively out of anxiety. After all, in his heart, my life is more important than anything else. I was very uneasy, but there was nothing else I could do now. I could only force myself to suppress it and stared coldly at Chu Mulan. I still had some doubts that I couldn't figure out. I asked, how can you be so sure that the USB drive in my hand is definitely fake? I'm not a fool. He looked at me with a bit of surprise in his eyes. The USB drive contains the records of my relationship with Wenbei. Why would she pass on something that no one cares about? She even sacrificed her life for it. He paused and then said through gritted teeth, however, I guess your parents found out something from Wenbei. They really loved their daughter. In the year after Wenbei died, they kept investigating our legitimate business. Several of our major funding chains were cut off by your parents. They were almost about to trace it back to me, so I had to deal with them quickly. I was stunned for a moment and then roared, you killed my parents. He shrugged indifferently. Of course, I also killed Wenbei. I couldn't possibly keep the lives of those who tried to send me to prison, could I? He said it so lightly, as if he hadn't killed people but some chickens and ducks for dinner. I was so angry that I gasped for breath and struggled to rush towards him, but the iron chains held me back. No wonder I wanted to take a leave of absence from school and go back to accompany my parents for a while after Wenbei died, but they acted unusually and firmly insisted that I must go back to complete my studies. Their excuse at that time was that the Wen family could only be handed over to me in the future, and I should study hard, so they already knew at that time. I felt that I had to use a great deal of effort to breathe, but I still couldn't catch my breath because of the pain. He suddenly said again, come to think of it, Xin Yanxi didn't seem to care much about this matter before, but recently, he started investigating Wenbei's affairs on a large scale. I'm afraid it's all for you. I really have you to thank. I finally have the opportunity to get rid of this hidden danger once and for all. My heart tightened when I heard the words, get rid of this hidden danger once and for all. Before I could think deeper about it, suddenly, the footsteps of several people were heard outside. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively looked towards the door. The next second, several people brought Xin Yanxi in. He was still wearing the clothes I wore on the day I was kidnapped, but he looked relatively neat. However, my first reaction was not joy. He actually came here alone, just like in the previous life. He didn't even bring a bodyguard. I immediately panicked, but now I couldn't ask anything, nor could I show my panic. My heart was still filled with grief and indignation because of what Chu Mulin had just said, but the situation was not optimistic. So I could only force myself to suppress these emotions. I kept staring closely at Shinyansi after he came in. He looked at me the first moment, and then he walked directly in front of Chu Mulin. The people who came in with him didn't leave but surrounded him. I couldn't see the situation inside clearly, but I could hear the voices. Shinyansi said coldly, I prepared the thing you want, and I didn't bring anyone else. Let Wen Nan go. Chu Mulin sneered, now that you're here, do you really think you can leave? Although it's understandable that you're worried and act recklessly, Shinyansi. I didn't expect you to be so irrational. I told you to come alone, and you really came alone. Since you both know my secret, you're not leaving today. Shinyansi didn't respond to him. I really wanted to know what Shinyansi's situation was now. It was just that I couldn't hear anything useful from his inner thoughts. Shinyansi usually had a lot of thoughts in his mind and talked a lot. But once he really entered a highly concentrated state, he had no distracting thoughts at all. After waiting for a long time, Shinyansi finally said in a deep voice, what Wenbei left wasn't a USB drive but a memory card. She hid it in the gap of the seat in the auditorium of School X. The content inside is a complete process of a murder. In a warehouse, there were a lot of people around, and your clear face was shown. When I heard Shinyansi finish speaking, I widened my eyes first. Did Wenbei really manage to film it? And without a doubt, this was probably the punishment scene that Chu Mulin had just mentioned. Give it to me. Chu Mulin suddenly raised his voice. And then there was silence all around. I was so nervous that my palms started to sweat. Shinyansi sneered, you're planning to kill both of us, and you still expect me to give it to you. As soon as Shinyansi finished speaking, the group of people surrounding him suddenly assumed a posture as if they were going to snatch it by force. But Shinyansi's voice didn't waver at all. I prepared the thing, but I didn't say I brought it with me. Let Wen Nan leave, and I'll stay, as long as she's safe and sound. I promised to give you the thing. Chu Mulin flatly refused. Impossible. Since I dared to tell her everything, I have no intention of letting her leave. You can go, and she stays. I can also get that shipping route that your Shin family has always wanted. The Wen family has caused me so much trouble. If you hadn't married her the first moment after the Wen family's accident, do you think I would have let her live until today? Shinyansi remained unmoved. If my people don't see Wen Nan leave safely before dawn, they will hand this thing over to the police. If you don't believe it, you can kill us right now. Chu Mulin's voice was ice cold. Shinyansi, don't underestimate me. I also have people outside. Even if I really kill you too, your people may not have the ability to hand over the thing, then you can give it a try. Shinyansi even let out a light laugh, which was the strong confidence brought by his absolute certainty. It's difficult to bring you down, but I can still manage to bring the entire Shin family down with you and die together with you. Let's see if, after all your painstaking efforts to climb to this position, you're willing to risk your life and bet with me. As soon as Shinyansi finished speaking, I heard Chu Mulin curse viciously. Sure enough, when Chu Mulin told me everything so readily just now, he had no intention of letting me live. It seemed that Wenbei and my parents had caused him a lot of trouble. He probably hated our Wen family to the core. It's just that he probably didn't expect, even though he had been monitoring Wenbei so closely, Wenbei could still obtain such evidence that left him with no room to refute. He probably originally planned to get the evidence from us and then directly deal with us, but now he had to consider one more thing. However, after listening to Shinyansi's words and combining all the things that had happened during this period, I suddenly understood everything. The truth made me couldn't help laughing. In an instant, everyone's eyes were suddenly turned towards me. Chu Mulin looked at me fiercely and said coldly, Wen Nan, what are you laughing at? I'm laughing at your arrogance and conceit. You thought you had Wenbei under your control, but in the end, you were just being played by her. I laughed more and more recklessly. Chu Mulin suddenly pushed through the crowd and walked in front of me. Shinyansi immediately followed. At the same time, the group of people surrounding Shinyansi all took out their guns and pointed them at him. The atmosphere at the scene instantly became extremely tense. However, even though I was surrounded by guns now, I wasn't scared at all. I even looked at Chu Mulin with a smile and said softly, I didn't lie to you just now. The USB drive you got was the one that Wenbei pretended to pass on the message with. To be honest, when I first saw the content inside, I couldn't figure it out either. but now I know. After Wenbei found that she really couldn't break through your surveillance, she chose to give the clue to Shenyansi. She was being closely monitored by you, so she didn't dare to pass on the memory card openly. After all, this memory card was the biggest threat to you. Once there was any mistake, all her previous efforts would be in vain, so, as a last resort, she used a very roundabout way. Shenyansi timely picked up the conversation and told Chu Mulan how Wenbei had passed. Chu Mulan couldn't accept it. Impossible. I only took her to the base for the first time in City Z. She had no chance to record the video at all. Moreover, how could she have prepared to pass on the message with the diary so early? Are you two playing me? I sneered. That's why I said you were completely played by Wenbei. After she was forced to join you, she knew that it would be impossible for her to get away easily, so she prepared a basket in advance. If she couldn't expose you herself, she would throw the evidence into the basket, and this diary is the basket. Chu Mulan was completely stunned. He still didn't believe it. What you said is just a conclusion. From the time she left the diary until her death, almost a year passed. There were too many possibilities of accidents during this period. It was simply impossible to achieve. I rolled my eyes without hesitation. That's why I said you're stupid. After Wenbei was threatened by you to join, she should have been closely monitored by you immediately. At that time, she judged that your power was very strong, and among the people she knew, the only one who could compete with you was Shenyansi. But with her character, she wouldn't simply involve Shenyansi in such a dangerous matter. So at first, she definitely planned to try to expose you herself. Only if she really couldn't do it would she ask Shenyansi for help. If she wanted to ask Shenyansi for help, she had to leave a clue for Shenyansi. You're right. She really couldn't have predicted everything that would happen a year in advance. So with the things she could use at that time, only this diary could convey an accurate signal in advance. Whether it was the password, the address, or the diary itself, they were all conveying the same message. That is, this matter was related to you. And the reason she finally chose to put the memory card in the place where you first met was just to match the clue she left for Shenyansi. Chu Mulan's eyes became more and more fierce, and they even began to turn red faintly. She even made the worst-case scenario. The code she left could only be understood by Shenyansi. In this way, even if you found this diary in advance, it wouldn't be easy for you to find the memory card. However, the way Wenbei passed on the message was indeed too obscure. Even we investigated for a long time and even took the risk to get close to you. I paused for a moment, then gave Chu Mulan a malicious smile. Come to think of it, I should thank you. If you hadn't told me the date and place where you first met, we might have had to wait until the school auditorium was renovated to find the memory card. In fact, if I hadn't been reborn this time, we would never have known what Wenbei really meant until we died. Wenbei's plan was full of uncertainties and elements of luck, and it was full of loopholes. However, the more I thought about it, the sadder I felt. Wenbei's situation must have been extremely difficult at that time. She was being monitored and forced to do things she didn't want to do. She held the hopes of those abducted people in her hands, but she was at a loss as to how to save them. Chu Mulan was involved in a business with great influence. There were possibilities that the people he blocked couldn't pass on the evidence, and possibilities that the methods he discovered couldn't be used. She didn't have the opportunity to make mistakes. Once Chu Mulan knew the existence of this evidence, there would be no way to stop his criminal behavior. Wenbei must have endured indescribable pressure. Perhaps choosing such an extreme way in the end was also because she really wanted to be free. As for this USB drive, I'm afraid she deliberately let you find it. The purpose was to completely divert your attention. For this, she even risked her own life. I spoke again, and my whole demeanor became completely cold. Chu Mulan, you're too conceited. You took advantage of Wenbei's feelings and thought you had her completely under your control. However, you never expected that it was this relationship you despised that exposed everything about you and finally sent you to hell. After I finished speaking, Chu Mulan roared out of control. What he thought was having everything under control was just an illusion of being toyed with by others. Wenbei had been dead for 2 years, and he had been played for 2 years. He thought he was acting with me and tricking me into finding the USB drive for him. But he didn't know that the real evidence was also delivered to us by his own actions. This realization must be more painful than killing him. The more he couldn't accept the reality, the more satisfied I felt. Shenyansi had quietly walked to my side. Before we could have any communication, Chu Mulan suddenly laughed twice and said harshly, "Forget it, Wenbei is already dead. I don't need to argue with her." Neither of you is leaving today. I don't want the memory card anymore. But I'll take your lives. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly took out a gun and pulled the trigger at me. He was so fast that I didn't even have time to react. However, the next second, Shinyensi suddenly threw himself on me. I was stunned for a moment and shouted Shinyensi's name in a voice that lost its usual pitch. Suddenly, a neat and orderly sound of footsteps came from outside the room. I smelled the smell of blood coming from Shinyensi, and it gradually overlapped with the memories of my previous life. Those emotions that I had forcibly suppressed before couldn't be controlled anymore and surged out all at once. I seemed to be able to do nothing but shout Shinyensi's name. I didn't even feel that my wrist was scratched by the iron chain during the struggle. Nan, I'm fine, don't be afraid. I don't know. When Shinyensi hugged me and gently soothed my back, I was gradually pulled back to reality by his voice. I don't know when a group of police officers rushed into the room. However, Chumulin was nowhere to be seen. I stared blankly at Shinyensi. He gently kissed away my tears and slowly raised the corners of his mouth. It's all over, Nan. I didn't forget what you said. We wanted to win without any worries, and this time we did it. It took me a long time to react. It turned out that Shinyensi's actions this time were all in cooperation with the police. I let out a long sigh of relief and completely relaxed. Then I fainted unceremoniously. Everything was finally over. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Shinyensi was shot in the leg by Chumulin's final attack, and his hospital bed was next to mine. But he didn't lie in his own bed. Instead, he squeezed in with me. When he saw that I had woken up, he suddenly hugged me and cried silently. It was really not easy for us to be alive and hugging each other after going through so many things. But no matter how difficult it was, I couldn't stand it anymore. After he hugged me for 20 minutes, I forcefully pulled Shinyensi away. Just as I was about to ask him to tell me what happened next, I suddenly remembered the last sentence I heard before I fainted. I suddenly widened my eyes in disbelief and said, "By the way, Shinyensi, you said this time before. Could it be that you?" Shinyensi wiped the corner of his eye and smiled at me. Yeah, I remembered something these past few days. Sure enough, Shinyensi remembered the things of his previous life. Then, Shinyensi told me the parts that I didn't know. After I was kidnapped, he remembered some things. At that time, his people had already found the memory card, and he had also gotten in touch with the police. After he submitted the evidence to the police by combining the memories of the two lives, they formulated this plan. In his previous life, Shinyensi had already figured out the structure of the base where I was kidnapped clearly, so this time, he drew a map for the police according to his memory, and after discussion, it was decided that he would come first to delay the time and divert Chumulin's attention. Shinyensi had the latest communication and recording devices provided by the police on him. In order not to alert the enemy, he really went to meet Chumulin alone, and the police monitored the situation here in real time outside. At the same time, another group of police officers started searching for evidence in the base according to the map provided by Shinyensi. They made sure not to give Chumulin any chance to take advantage of loopholes and turn this situation around this time. After we found the USB drive, Chumulin might have been in a hurry or overconfident. He didn't bring many people to the base that day, and they were quickly subdued by the police. The moment Chumulin saw the police, he ran away from the other side, but in the end, he only reached the exit and was captured by the police who had already set up an inescapable net. There was nothing more we could do at this point. After that, we cooperated with the evidence collection. When this shocking human trafficking case that shook the whole country was completely solved, I went to see Chumulin once. I took Wenbei's diary and gave it to him, not for anything else. I just thought that Wenbei should witness his death. Before leaving, on a whim, I asked him one more question. Chumulin, did you have any real feelings for Wenbei at that time? Chumulin was silent for a while, and finally gave a mocking smile. You young masters and ladies born with a silver spoon in your mouth are really ridiculous. You surely don't understand. Living in a dark and sunless house, eating the vegetable leaves that others don't want, and wearing the clothes fished out of the trash can. The feeling that everyone looks down on you and anyone can bully you. Even when I returned to the Chu family later, the situation was the same. Feelings. Only people like you would value such useless things. I'm not that pathetic. You see, in the end, even though everyone scolds and spurns me, no one looks down on me. They have to admit that I'm amazing, which proves that my choice was right. After listening, I nodded and didn't say anything more. Everyone has their own aspirations, but I really wish that he could be a beast in his next life. On the day Chu Mulin was executed, Shin Yanxi and I went to the cemetery together. The police later told us, Chu Mulin's business sold young girls. They focused on quality rather than quantity, and the number of people transported at one time wasn't large. These girls would first receive unified training in various reception or flattering skills after being sent abroad. Then they would be sold to their regular business partners, and those girls were either orphans or people who were not valued in their families. Some people disappeared without anyone knowing. Some people were ignored by their families after receiving some money. In the end, very few people actually reported the cases, which was why Chu Mulin had been operating until now. There was only one girl. She was born in a family that favored sons over daughters and had depended on her elder sister since childhood. She was sold to Chu Mulin after being deceived by her boyfriend, and her parents ignored her after receiving a sum of money. But her elder sister didn't accept it and finally found a way to get into this place, and the video left by Wenbei was actually taken by this elder sister. This was learned from the mouths of the surviving girls, but they couldn't clearly say what exactly happened at that time. The girl who gave the memory card to Wenbei said that among those abducted girls, there had always been a rumor, that is, no matter who wanted to escape, they should take this memory card with them. Over the years, this memory card had passed through the hands of many girls. They all knew that if they were caught while trying to escape, they wouldn't be killed immediately. They still had the opportunity to meet other people and could pass this evidence on. As long as there was one person who didn't give up, one day they could save everyone. That day, this memory card was given to Wenbei, and thus, the prelude to all the subsequent events was opened. I told the whole story to Wenbei, my parents. The result of the struggle wasn't necessarily victory, or victory would come at a great cost, but if people really had souls, I hope that Wenbei and my parents can let go after hearing this. At least we did a good thing, didn't we? I chattered on in front of the tombstone for a long time. Shin Yanxi stayed by my side all the time, although he didn't say anything. Just his presence made me feel very at ease. When we were leaving and walking out, I suddenly grabbed his hand and said, Shin Yanxi, I'll tell you a secret. I can really read minds. I turned to him and winked slyly, then slowly said, for example, I know that you were just thinking of asking Xiao Zhan to prepare a press conference to officially clarify the so-called substitute rumor. Shin Yanxi's pupils dilated slightly. He blurted out, how do you know? I hummed triumphantly. I told you I can read minds. Shin Yanxi didn't say anything. I continued. We both know that Chu Mulin fanned the flames of that substitute rumor. Now that he's dead, the rumor is long gone. Let's just deal with it coldly. It will be dispelled naturally after a long time. I could hear Shin Yanxi's muttering in my ear. Chongjia, be good and listen. I'll let you do whatever you want tonight. Okay, Shin Yanxi, stop muttering in your heart. If you have the guts, say it out loud. Okay, me. The moment we walked out of the cemetery, a group of butterflies flew past me. They flew around the cemetery in a group. Then they all flew towards the clear blue sky together, charging towards a new life.